and apologies from Councillors Benny, Holden, Rennie and Lindsay. Councillor Lee, I haven't heard from him, he's not here, so I'll give him an opportunity to turn it before we record it. Is online?
He was earlier.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the protocol. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Kilncraigs. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. If a fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the Fire Marshal has advised it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the Fire Marshal to ensure access routes are kept clear for all emergency vehicles. Please note this is a public meeting and members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with express permission of the convener. The members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and can all attendees mute their microphone when not speaking. Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak at any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. If members have not been able to access any papers for this meeting, could you please indicate? Okay, thank you. Do you have any declarations of interest this morning? You'll have had circulated yesterday, I think, from member services, an item of urgent business that was submitted by Councillor Paulson in the form of a motion. Having considered that motion is a matter for urgent business, I've agreed to have it on the agenda. I think the timeline was the reason for accepting it to the agenda this morning. The award itself was only given out on the Monday night, and then the Tuesday was the day with the deadline for it to come in within the 7 days. Coincidentally, I wasn't in the country at the time. Councillor Forson did manage to get the motion done that week, but I wasn't here to consider it. So I think, given it the next meeting, given it the summer recess isn't until well into August, we'll have missed the moment. I think that would be a disservice to the individuals that the motion makes reference to. So I'm happy to have it on the agenda this morning. It will be heard as the second last item on the agenda. It will be the last item in the public part of today's meeting. We'll go through the minutes from the previous meeting, which was Thursday, 15th of May. We'll just do them by page number again. If there's anyone on those pages, then just indicate. So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13. I'm happy to approve the minutes.
One point.
Councillor.
And then in line with the drug and alcohol policy, we've made a phone call on that. It's not been recorded yet.
Was this on the drug and alcohol policy?
Page 11, start at page 12.
So I wouldn't say.
Roll call vote on the minutes.
So that wasn't unanimous, that one.
The drugs and alcohol policy, if you want, details in the roll call vote.
Okay, so I'll have that checked and corrected.
Thank you.
Subject to that, I'll be happy to approve the minutes. Okay. Okay, so the first paper this morning is a medium-term financial strategy paper, and Lindsay is going to take it through. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. This report presents the Council's medium-term financial strategy for approval. The medium-term financial strategy, the strategy, has been developed as part of the Best Value Action Plan approved by Council in November 24. The strategy has been prepared in line with guidance from Audit Scotland and in consideration of good practice examples of those published by other councils. The strategy sets out how the Council intends to manage its resources over the medium term of 5 years to achieve financial sustainability. It incorporates information from various sources routinely reported to Council, such as the Be the Future reports, budget setting and budget strategy updates. The strategy details the estimated funding gap of 19 million over the 5-year period and the financial planning assumptions that underlie this. It also sets out the uncertainties and risks that the Council faces and the impact of the variability of those assumptions on the funding gap. The strategy further details the specific challenges faced by the Council at both a national and local context and sets out the mitigations that the Council is undertaking in light of these current challenges. To address the funding gap, the strategy focuses on 3 core elements: reducing expenditure, maximising income, and transformation of service delivery. A financial resilience framework is also being developed, which will enhance long-term stability. The strategy aims to be realistic, pragmatic, and action-focused, and seeks to build on sound financial management foundations and a positive track record of delivery to date. However, the strategy also highlights the fact that due to the significant work and decisions taken over more than a decade, the options available to the Council are diminishing and not always entirely within the Council's sole influence. As a consequence of this, progress will be carefully monitored and reported and acted upon, and the strategy will remain a live document which will regularly be updated for significant variations and assumptions. So I'm happy to take any questions on the strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Do we have any questions? Councillor Coyne, Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. Lindsay, it's just a simple question. On page 77, under mitigation strategies, near the bottom of the page, it says officers are participating in a COSLA group, etc., which is reviewing the challenges. I'm just wondering, is that being done more in hope than in expectation? How engaged are the other side of this, and do you expect anything to actually come out of this?
Thank you. So we've been engaging with both COSLA and Scottish Government for quite some time now, both myself, the Chief Executive, and the Leader of the Council. And one of the results of that was COSLA recognising that a group for issues being experienced by smaller councils to get together. So there is definitely a recognition through COSLA that there is the challenges faced by the councils in setting this group up. However, there has only been one meeting of the group, and despite us trying to move that forward, that has been slow to come forward. So I think in answer to your question, there is that engagement and recognition there, but it's not really moving at a pace that we would like to see at this point.
I mean, thanks for that. But given that where we are in our existential crisis, isn't this something we should be pushing hard for? Because it's one of the ways that we can fundamentally alter our budgeting. If we get recognition, not just the recognition, that's one thing. It's all very well saying, great, we recognise this, but will action come out of it? Will something actually change? And because I think we need that desperately.
Just come in briefly, then I think Mickey wants to come in also. Yeah, I'll probably just pass over to Mickey first. Thanks.
Morning, Councillor. Thank you, Lindsay. I would completely agree with the statements that Councillor Coyne has made in terms of the importance and significance of that engagement. As you know from previous updates to Council, we've been really prioritising that both politically and managerially. However, in specific terms, what we have done in the discussions with COSLA outside of this group is we had shared with COSLA officials the asks that we made of Scottish Government in the pre-budget engagement period last year. One of those particularly was intended to form part of the work group that COSLA has set up. As Lindsay says, that group has only met once. So just very recently, in the last 10 days to 2 weeks, I had actually followed that up again with COSLA. and ask the officers there if we can be of assistance in helping them develop out that proposition, because I'm very mindful of the timescales in the run into the next budget round. I hope that extra information is helpful.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. Lindsay, page 39, you note that there's no significant opportunities for income generation. Apart from the obvious things like concentrated efforts to reduce rent arrears, council tax arrears, increase capital receipts, etc., what are we or could we do to increase our income potential?
Thank you. As I've noted here, there's limited ability for the council to increase its income. We don't have the same options as some of the bigger councils, such as Glasgow and Edinburgh, with the visitor tax and even parking. So we don't generate income from that area. So we have to look at what we do have and trying to maximise the areas that we have in terms of income. So you mentioned capital receipts. So looking at our asset management strategy, which is scheduled to come forward again, to see that if we can release some of our buildings. And we're also looking at the areas where we have some unique skills in the council. So in terms of our training offering, so we're offering that not just internally, but to external organisations. We're looking at in terms of our design offering as well. So looking at areas of the council where we can try and offer that to others. So while we're small, we've still got that specific skills that we can offer. Obviously the Wellbeing Hub, when that comes on board, we'll have income generation through that. But it's really looking at these areas where we've got that ability to market ourselves and offer something externally. But that is a balance between trying to deliver our services on a day-to-day basis, as well as trying to raise income through these extra things.
Nikki, do you want to come in and say a point?
Yes, please, Convener, if that's okay. So just in addition to what Lindsay said, I don't think I heard anybody mention council tax. And I just wanted to mention, it's a bit of bread and butter stuff for Lindsay and I, but the Act, the Local Government Act, actually suggests that council tax is the means by which you balance up any deficit if there's a shortfall between expenditure and income. Now, obviously, you'll be very alive to the sensitivities of very high council tax increases. So that is something that would need to be managed extremely carefully. However, the other aspect that I would highlight is the work that we've been doing on our investment strategy. As you know, we have had some success at leveraging external funding. That has been in the form of both financial support and expertise with secondments and so on, as well as people providing specific expertise to assist with some of our transformation work. That effectively acts as substitution, because it means that obviously we're not necessarily having to either fund that ourselves or the income is offsetting the cost of meeting some of the tasks that we need to complete. So we will be continuing with that investment strategy, which has actually helped us considerably in the last few years, particularly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Quinn?
Thanks, Convener. I wasn't actually going to bring this up, but you mentioned it yourself in the passing there, and that was it's mentioned in the minutes of the last meeting, the decriminalisation of parking in the places. Is that progressing at all? I know there's possibly a report coming to us in the future, but has there been some engagement with the police on that?
Great, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. In terms of the decriminalisation of parking, we, in the back of the last Council's meeting, we have prepared a response back to the police. I have had initial conversations with the Chief Inspector to advise her that we are progressing towards that aim, and we will bring a paper in terms of that route map back to Council by the end of the calendar year to outline how
and we will take that forward in the timelines involved in that piece of work. What I would like to highlight is that it is at least a minimum of an 18-month period to progress that piece of work. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Lindsay. Councillor Forson to move the paper.
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to propose the medium-term financial strategy for Clackmanannshire Council from 2025 to 2030. Audit Scotland, in its recent evaluation of the Council, acknowledged the continuous improvement made by the Council over the last 5 years in many areas, but highlighted the need for a medium-term financial strategy, and this report delivers that. I'd like to put on record my thanks to Nikki, Lindsay and the wider team for all their hard work in pulling this together. So the strategy sets out how we will manage our finances over the medium term, ensuring we remain focused on delivering the services our communities need, whilst taking difficult but necessary decisions to secure our financial sustainability. We do bring forward the proposal from a position of strong foundations. We have a solid track record in financial management. We've delivered over £74 million of savings since 2010, and we've done so while protecting core frontline services as much as possible. We've demonstrated leadership in service transformation through our Be the Future programme, and we do continue to work collaboratively with partners across sectors to deliver better outcomes. But we can't get away from the fact that the context we are operating now is more challenging than ever. As the smallest mainland authority in Scotland, we already face unique structural pressures. Demand for services like education, social care and housing support continues to rise, and increasingly it exceeds what traditional deprivation measures alone would suggest. This is not just a financial issue, it's a reflection of the real complex needs of the people that we serve. What makes our position even more difficult is the number of critical factors that are out with our local control, but what have a direct and growing impact on our ability to plan and deliver services. National insurance increases have added nearly £1 million to our staffing costs without any real corresponding increase to fully fund them. Inflation remains persistently high, impacting the cost of everything from energy and construction to care home placements and school meals. We must plan for ongoing pay growth in the region of 3% per annum, entirely reasonable for our valued workforce, but financially significant. At the same time, government funding remains relatively flat in real terms. And while we've had success in balancing the 25-26 budget through savings and limited use of reserves, we know this approach cannot sustain the years ahead. There is a real risk of further UK welfare reforms, including cuts to benefits, that will only increase pressure on local services. And we know that when national safety nets are withdrawn or weakened, it's our schools, our social work teams and our community services that people turn to. This is why the projected funding gap of £19.1 million by 29/30, rising to almost £48 million in a worst-case scenario, is so stark. Because whilst we are doing everything in our power locally, the levers of funding and regulation that drive much of our cost base are held nationally. In short, we are being asked to meet rising demand and higher expectations with fewer real-term resources, and to do so from a baseline where most of the obvious efficiencies have already been realised. And that is the difficulty and the reality that we must face together. And so the strategy I'm proposing today is a multi-pronged one. Reducing expenditure further, though with recognition that this is becoming more complex and challenging. Maximising income, including making full use of local flexibility and charging powers. And most crucially, transformational change, not just as a buzzword, but as a genuine shift in how we think about and design our public services. Our investment in digital and data transformation will help us make better decisions, work more efficiently, and move earlier towards prevention and early intervention. A financial resilience framework will help us plan for the long term, and our capital investment and asset strategies will ensure our physical and technological infrastructure supports modern, effective service delivery. But, Convener, we must also be honest. Whilst this strategy is robust and grounded, it cannot achieve its goals in isolation. The scale of the financial pressures we face demands sustained and strategic national engagement, not just from local government, but from all levels of government. We need a conversation about what local government is being asked to deliver and how that is resourced. We need recognition that small authorities like Clackmanannshire face particular challenges of scale, capacity and demand, and we need financial levers and flexibility that reflect those realities. However, despite those challenges, I do remain optimistic. We're not starting from scratch, we've got a strong platform to build from, and this strategy is about making the best use of what we have and pressing for what we need to sustain essential public services that our communities rely on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison to second.
Thanks, Convener. Due to the work that has already been carried out, has been mentioned already, over the last 10 years or more, there are increasingly fewer options open to the Council to make savings while also maintaining services. We did approve a balanced budget in 25-26 with general fund net revenue of 171 million and a capital budget of 29 million. This was achieved through 3.8 million savings and the use of 1.7 million in reserves. The Council continues to face a projected cumulative funding gap of 19.1 million by 29-30, driven by inflation, pay pressures, demographic demand and flat grant funding. Pragmatic and sustainable decisions continue to be made to allow us to deliver services while continuing to balance the budget, and the medium-term financial strategy set out today aims to continue this by looking at reducing expenditure but also maximising income and transformation of service delivery. As has been mentioned earlier, war in Ukraine, energy crisis, cost of living crisis, increased demand for services, recovery from the COVID pandemic, high inflation, Brexit inflation, all show how volatile the economy has been over the last few years. And just recently, we've seen the national insurance increase for employers and tensions in the Middle East rise again. Along with the growing need for services, these are all factors that the Council has no control over. This all reinforces the need for a medium-term financial strategy that is reviewed regularly and can react as and when conditions change. This is a comprehensive and detailed piece of work, and I'd like to thank Lindsay and the rest of the team for the hard work put in for this. I'm happy to second the paper.
Thank you. The paper is now open for debate. Any wish to debate further? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, it's a good paper, it's a comprehensive one, and yeah, I would thank officers as well for putting it together. And I would totally agree with what Ellen says about this. Governments at all levels need to look at this and how, in the necessary pursuit of financial sustainability, how much longer can we have local authorities that are fit for purpose? There are different beasts now to when we started all these savings, because saving like this translates to hardship in the community. And I just, yeah, my heart sinks when I see reduced spend, because I think how much more reduced spend can we do, you know? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I think what the report does quite succinctly is to position us in the public mind, and anyone who chooses to read the report, it can be left in no doubt of the problems that we face going forward. But, and I understand Councillor Martin's concerns, but I'm always hopeful that necessity being the mother of invention, ways will be found to cope with it. The Brits like a challenge, and I'm sure we'll do our best to try and pull this out of the mire, as it were. So it's a good paper, and I think it's useful information, succinctly put together and helpful in our cause.
Thank you. Anybody else? Do you need the opportunity, so? No. Okay, subject to the points we've been asked to note at 212 to 215, I'll be happy to agree the medium-term financial strategy, which is outlined in Appendix A. All agreed? Yeah, okay, thank you. Item 5 is the Be the Future Clackmanannshire Transformation Space Update, and Lorraine will take us through that this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Morning, councillors.
So as the report outlines, this provides some update on parts of the Council's transformation plans, in particular the agreement to go forward with the Clackmanannshire transformation space, which was agreed in March. Notably, Council should note that we have been successful in achieving a £1 million investment into the transformation space from Scottish Government under the Invest to Save Fund, which means that we have a strong start in being able to start to work through the year zero, as was outlined in the March report. The report also comments that we have made progress on the setting up of the community interest company, so that has now been registered, and there'll be further developments on that when the next paper comes forward. At the moment, I have been appointed as the sole director of that to get it up and running and get it started. There's also been progress on the citizens panel. We've had meetings with members of the community, wide-ranging members. We've been out speaking to different groups who have personal experience in the community, the recovery community, some of the alcohol and drugs and community justice folk as well. So the aim is that the citizens panel will be a wide representation of members of the community who will be able to assess the bids that come into the transformation space and decide whether they think that is something that should go forward. The oversight board will have the role, so there's checks and balances all the way, which we explained in March, but they will have a role to oversee the bids, so it's not going to be a process that we just hand everything over to the community and then wait and see what happens. There's various checks and balances in there too. So there'll be further updates on the oversight board and membership of the oversight board at the next meeting. Notably, apart from the £1 million, we've also identified some funding internally that can go into the transformation space, notably some mental health funding money, homeless prevention money, and money for family support through the Family Wellbeing Partnership. So we will start to theme the areas where we will be asking the community to come forward with their own solutions around some of those areas, and to see whether we can actually start to shift some of the services and the solutions from the council over into the community in the coming months and years if we go forward after year zero. I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine. Do we have any questions? Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Kevin. Lorraine, this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but on page 85, 2.6, or 2.5 tells me I'm being asked to approve 2.6. I'm just wondering if you could express 2.6 using different words. I found it extremely difficult to understand exactly what all of that meant.
So at the moment, the council budgets go through the council budget process, and they're allocated into the directors and into the various strands. What we've done is something slightly different in this case. So we're actually taken the areas who are responsible for those funds have actually identified and checked all the grant arrangements to make sure that we can do this in the first place. So it's all legal and above board, in fact, what we're proposing. But because it is slightly different, we're coming forward to council for that transparency to say, are you happy that we are transferring the money into this, because it's something that we haven't done before.
Transferring it into the CIC, is that what we're talking about?
Into the transformation space.
Okay. The CIC has a name, presumably, does it? What's the name of the CIC?
It just has a name as the Clackmanannshire transformation space.
That's it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Harrison.
Morning, Lorraine. The citizens panel, how many people do we expect to be on that, and have we had any numbers coming forward already? Because the two community councils I've been at recently and another couple of meetings that's come up, and people seem genuinely quite excited about it.
So we're looking for between 40 and 50 people to come forward for the citizens panel. They won't all be asked to look at every theme and every set of bids. It will be depending on their interests. So there may be some people who would have more of an interest in mental health. There may be some who may have more of an interest in youth employment, for example. We had two events this week up in the Hive, a lunchtime event and an evening event. And we've already got sign-up from about 13 or 14 people from those events, including members of the community councils who were there. But equally, not just, we're going out to seek people with specific interests as well, so that we're not just relying on the usual volunteers coming forward to say they want to be there and make the decisions. It's actually, we're taking a proactive. So I'm quite hopeful that we'll get a good cross-representation and we'll get good numbers from the response so far.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Can I ask Councillor Forson to move the paper?
Thanks, Convener. I'm very pleased to propose this paper, which outlines the continued progress of the Be the Future Clackmanannshire transformation space, which we've heard is an innovative and community-rooted approach that represents a real step change in how we tackle some of our most pressing local challenges. So since the Council last considered this programme in March, we have made substantial progress. I'm delighted to confirm that our £1 million bid to the Scottish Government's Invest to Save Fund has been successful. This is a significant investment which will support the foundational work of Year Zero, which will establish, test and shape the transformation space and the new community interest company. Importantly, this funding is more than just a financial boost. It's clear evidence of the Scottish Government's support and belief in the strength of this initiative and its alignment with national priorities, including whole family wellbeing and the ambitions of the Verity House Agreement. The Community Interest Company was formally constituted on the 16th of June and work is well underway to establish a citizens panel, with recruitment focused on individuals with lived experience of the issues we aim to address. The Oversight Board, including elected member representation, will follow shortly, providing the necessary governance and challenge. In parallel, the Council have identified a further £300,000 on funding, focusing on mental health, homelessness prevention and family wellbeing, and this will be pulled through Foundation Scotland. These funds will be used to support locally developed, community-led solutions aligned to our shared outcomes under the Clackmanannshire Alliance. And I wanted to take the opportunity to emphasise how this approach fully aligns with the Council's strategic priorities. Firstly, it helps us ensure that families, children and young people have the best possible start in life by directing investment into early prevention and integrated family support. Secondly, it supports resilient and empowered communities, giving local people direct voice and agency in shaping the services and investments that affect their lives. And thirdly, it aligns with our ambition that Clackmanannshire is an attractive place with fair opportunities for all, by tackling inequality and building a wellbeing economy. And finally, it supports the aspirations of women and girls to be confident and achieve their full potential, through a model that listens to and values diverse lived experience. This is a genuine shift from delivering services to communities to designing solutions with them. It reflects the values of the Verity House Agreement and embodies the Christie principles of early intervention, partnerships and empowered public service reform. Looking ahead, a key next step will be to engage closely with our community planning partners to further develop the transformation space model. This will allow us to explore opportunities to maximise the pooling of resources across sectors and ensuring all investment is aligned to the outcomes we've agreed together for Clackmanannshire. Council is therefore asked to note the progress made, the success of the funding bid and the steps taken to establish the Citizens Panel, Oversight Board and Community Interest Company. We are also asked to approve the transfer of identified council budgets and grants to Foundation Scotland, subject to appropriate legal and financial checks. I commend this report to Council and I hope that everyone can support it as we continue to deliver bold, community-led transformations for the people of Clackmanannshire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Law to second.
Thanks. I'm happy to second this. I think it's really kind of what we were speaking about in the previous paper, kind of looking at doing things differently, and I think it's really important. So I'm looking forward to the things that will come in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. The paper's open now for debate. Any wish to debate? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I would agree that there's quite a bit of positivity about this, because we are having to do things in a different way. But yes, and I look forward to seeing updates on it in the future.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Paulson, do you need the opportunity to sum up? No. Okay, so what we've been asked to do is to note the success of the £1 million investment to save fund bids over the financial year in connection with Clackmanannshire transformation space, to note the update on other funding that's been identified for year zero of the project, which is contained in some paragraphs 371 to 373, the update in year zero set-up of the CIC, the ongoing diligence and governance requirements contained in paragraphs 33 to 36, and the interim arrangement and appointment of the strategic director for people to the community interest company. What we've been asked to approve is the transfer of identified council budget and/or grants, noted within the report and subject to input from Senior Manager of Legal and Governance and Chief Finance Officer. Any future identified council budgets and/or grants to transfer Foundation Scotland as part of the operation of the Transformation Vehicle Fund. I'm happy to approve the paper. Thank you. Item 6 is the Quality Impact Assessment of Home to School Transfer Policy.
Apologies, convener. So I'm bringing forward this paper in response to two previous papers and with an apology to council. We had intended to bring forward the equality impact assessment on school transport to today's meeting. However, there's a couple of outstanding issues that we just haven't been able to find the time to resolve over the last few weeks, purely down to capacity and annual leave. And I would ask council if we can bring that paper back in August instead of today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you able to give us some kind of indication of how complete it is just now, or any more kind of details that you're able to share just now? Thank you.
Yeah, it's very near completion, to be honest. It's more to do with the issues that I don't want to come to council without having all the answers that to the questions that I might be asked on the day. And I don't feel comfortable to be able to say to council that I'll have to go away and get those answers. So it's less to do with the EQIA and it's the next steps, and that's partly. So we're fairly close to having a final EQIA. It's just that it's what does that then mean, and I need to be a bit clearer on some of those aspects.
Hi, I was doing your stuff there. So just take the following. So you're very confident we'll be here for August then, and we'll have everything, and we'll have a paper. We'll be able to answer all the questions then. Yes.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic.
Okay, do you have any questions? Councillor Lawton.
There's not much I can say, but I just propose the paper. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Harrison to second.
Yeah, happy to second that. I do think that it's crucial that we get this done correctly and give it the due diligence and attention that it deserves.
Okay, thanks. So the paper's simply asking us to note, are we happy to note the content of the paper? Sorry, there's an opportunity to debate the paper already, was it? I assume that's a no. Okay, we're happy to note the paper. Okay, so item 7 is the South of Scotland Electric Vehicle Strategy and Update, and Kevin will take us through that one.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Council. The paper before you members is a report to provide an update to Council on the progress of the South of Scotland Electric Vehicle Partnership and seek approval of the South of Scotland Electrical Vehicle Charging Strategy. Members, this collaboration is a coordinated region-wide approach to delivering and operating public EV charging infrastructure across 8 council areas, and those collaborative partners are outlined in paragraph 3.1 of the report. The collaboration aims to provide a consistent user experience, reduce operational costs and streamline management through a central team. It's intended that by procuring as a region, the offering to the commercial sector will be more attractive and commercially viable, a challenge which we would face here locally within Clackmanannshire. EV chargers within Clackmannanshire will be accessed, are currently accessed via the Charge Place Scotland back office system. We have been advised that that system will be switched off in April of next year. And the deadlines is a driver for this piece of work progressing at the pace that it is. As part of the South of Scotland collaboration, a grant offer from Transport Scotland has been made in the region of 6.3 million to progress this piece of work. The condition of the grant has within it to produce and publish an EV strategy by the summer of this year. It's intended through that strategy that around 80 new chargers will be delivered within the Clackmannanshire area by 2030. And members within paragraph 311, the councils will work together within the collaboration to monitor pricing to ensure it broadly aligns with the national benchmark, ensuring consistency and fairness across the network. This expansion will also support the regional shared goal of decarbonisation of transport across the south of Scotland. I think it is worthwhile highlighting that in terms of the tariffs that we currently charge here within Clackmannanshire are in line with comparable commercial tariffs, and therefore that transition should be fairly smooth for our locality. I would also like to highlight in 3.2, we are anticipating that there will be a range of other additional benefits through the contract that will be awarded. The definitive level of those benefits are not yet known, as we haven't yet signed a contract. In that sense, that will come back to this council for approval in due course. What I would say, members, is outlined in paragraph 314. We have only a small window to look at an alternative approach, and we can only see two alternative arrangements here in place for us. And that would be to go alone or to stop the provision of public EV charging facilities. What I would like to highlight also within that paragraph is that should the council choose that former option, identify budget, not just capital but also revenue budget, to progress that work would need to be sought as it currently does not exist. Members, the report is there and the strategy is attached as an appendix. I have officers with me should there be any questions that you have in relation to the report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Do you have any questions? Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Convener. Kevin, we've had this conversation already, but I'm really keen that it talks about an area-wide benefit. I'm really keen that that area-wide benefit is not focused on the main area of the region, which is Edinburgh, who are going to be the lead on that. How can we make sure that there are benefits, as well as the chargers coming into the area, that we do see further benefits on the back of this?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. In terms of the approach that we're trying to take here is recognising that this cannot be just centralised in certain hub areas within the collaboration. We are seeking that it is across the whole region, and that's why we're anticipating, we're outlining within the strategy our aims to see those additional chargers within our county area as part of that wider network. Obviously, being part of that bigger system makes it more attractable and more feasible for any private entity to progress that work. And we will absolutely be ensuring that our voices are heard in terms of those other knock-on benefits in that sense. And we will be certainly advocating very strenuously in terms of that contract that is in there for the wider benefit of the whole region, not just the bigger players.
One more, if that's okay. You've talked about the options. if Charles Point Scotland switched off and we don't go with this. Can you just expand a wee bit more on what that would actually mean financially and resource-wise within the council?
Thank you, Councillor Harrison, through you, Chair. In terms of that, we currently have no budget in place for progressing this work. It is being funded through grants that we received from Transport Scotland, and they're very clear that that money will then go towards the collaboration. We would need to find money not only to upgrade the chargers as they're starting to come close to the end of life cycle, but also the repairing of those budgets or those equipment should be damaged or vandalised, the ongoing costs for revenue in terms of continuing that, as well as the purchasing of a backhouse system to enable us to allow that progressing of payments and charges. It could be quite significant. I don't have an exact figure of what that would cost in terms of running it ourselves, but certainly I would imagine that that would be a sizable sum, including ongoing staffing costs to monitor, administer, address all of those issues.
So on the basis of all of that and what we heard before about the financial strategy, I take it there's no profit to be made on that if we go it alone as a small local authority.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of income generation and number of charges that we have, the usage that we currently have, I cannot see at this stage any possibility of the process covering its costs, certainly not in the short to medium term.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCluckie, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Chair. Kevin, if I can draw your attention to the graph at the bottom of the table, page 123, in particular the projected growth in that table. My understanding is that figure in terms of 25% or thereabouts increase, that projected growth isn't based on sales data, vehicle manufacturing figures. It's based on what the authors of the report hope or need electric vehicle uptake to be to meet net zero targets. So if electric vehicle uptake was to be significantly less than that, how would you assess how worthwhile this collaboration would be in terms of if the infrastructure is not used to the capacity we think because electric vehicle uptake just hasn't met those targets?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor McCluckie. In terms of the projection, the anticipated usage, we are basing on a hope in terms of where it would end up, and we know that there is a growth in EV uptake, and that will have an impact in terms of the contract that is there. That will be the onus of the awardee and who's been awarded the contract, and they will factor that in terms of the contract that they sign up to. In that sense, I don't have the specifics in terms of the wording and the safeguards within the contract as such, but we are working collectively across the whole collaboration, actually through the same lawyer group, to ensure that there's a consistency of approach and safeguarding for all councils involved. What I would say is that the alternative doesn't fill me with a great deal of hope, because I don't see a route that is going to be sustainable for us otherwise in that regard. So therefore we are relying on those within the sector who know this sector better than us, and in terms of the safeguard that the contract will give us, in terms of the responsibility and onus will be on the contractor.
Okay, Councillor Coyne.
Thank you, Chair. Kevin, Councillor McCluckie picked up my first question, which was on that graph, because looking at the graph, you can see that the last part of it is flattening out. And what momentous event has taken place that's making it shoot up in the air like that? I can't see it. out there in the marketplace, and that there's pressure against the EV market in terms of car manufacturers' intentions. Some of them are dumping their ranges, etc. There's a big question mark over this whole EV thing. However, that's irrelevant. What that wraps around is my concern about the risks to council of this whole venture. If I understand the model correctly, it is that we are acting collectively with another 7 authorities to try and provide a critical mass of an investment capability for a private contractor to say, that's a big apple, I'll pluck that and make it work for me. On the economies of scale, which is why we couldn't do it ourselves, as Councillor Harrison was alluding to. So that's the model, basically. We are a dating agency, in a sense, between ourselves, or the scheme is a dating agency between ourselves and an unknown private contractor. Is that right? If that's question one, first part of the question. Second question is, what risks are we left with at the end of the day once that marriage has taken place?
Thank you, Councillor Coyne, and through you, Chair. In terms of your first illustration, I would say that that's probably very similar. We are looking for this collaboration to be the interface in terms of potential critical mass that will make it more feasible than ourselves going it alone, and also coordinating that across that region. It is also seen as quite a bold and innovative approach to this area of work. In terms of your second question, in terms of the safeguarding and what risks are involved to us, I think no more risk than if we were to do nothing and lose the network in that sense. Safeguards will be in there as part of the contract. Now, we have not signed up to a contract. This is about progressing towards a contract, of which case we will review meticulously to ensure that this council is safeguarded within that process, and that will come back to this council for approval with recommendations outlining what risks are involved. In that sense, as mentioned in previous responses, we don't see a credible alternative option at this stage for us in that sense. But before we sign up to anything in terms of a contract, we will bring it back forward, outlining any risks that exist and also what benefits would come with that particular contract as well, given the legal advice that we obtain as part of that collaboration. I hope that gives additional assurance.
Yes, there's a fair degree of comfort in that, because it's a very cloudy future in terms of the EV market, because it depends on so many things, people's behaviour, also the ability of the grid to step up to the mark and supply the electricity. If that kind of increase takes place, and that goes on over the next few years, the grid's going to have to work very hard to plug the gap between what it can do now and what it will need to supply in the future. So that's, and as always, we are not going to get caught anywhere in that. If we can just put this together, hand it over and walk away from it, I'm happy with that. So we're being asked to approve the publication of the vehicle charging strategy. That seems simple enough in itself. Why would we not approve it?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Coyne. I can't give you any reason not to. Certainly the officer recommendation is to approve it. In that sense, it is part of that work towards the particulars for the contract for it. And we gave a commitment that we would update council throughout, rather than delegated just to officers in that sense, and we would bring back the contract in due course. And that, so this is part of that commitment that we gave. And certainly the officer recommendation is to approve.
Okay, so the point of the publication is to allow you to move, to have something to hand over to people to view, to sell the story, as it were. That's fine.
Okay, Councillor Quinn.
I think Councillor Law's hand just a split second before mine. I'll take that one.
My apologies.
So, I just wondered, so is this essentially going to be its kind of own entity? And I'm assuming that it won't require like any more input financially from us, and that there's any income raised there, it will be reinvested to improve what's been set up there. Is that kind of how it's going to run, or is there something different going on? Thanks.
If you don't mind, Councillor Quinn, I'm going to ask one of my officers to come in and add a little bit additional information to that question. Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Was it about the financial inputs from the council? Am I correct?
Inputs and if there's any kind of gains.
Okay, in terms of the procurement of the concession contract, that's been funded through a Transport Scotland grant, so that's all funded through that. The actual start, the pump priming of the contract is also part funded by Transport Scotland. So in terms of financial input from the council at this stage, it's predominantly staff resource, which is probably myself and colleagues. Like anything, we don't know what's down the road, so we don't anticipate anything coming from council. This is a commercial offering. The concession operator will take all the risks and the income from the tariffs, and that's how this will be funded. The contract will be managed through a regional contract management team, which will likely be based on one of the local authorities. At the moment, Edinburgh is the lead authority, so it's likely them. The ask is of the concession operator to fund that through a concession fee, and that will cover all the operating costs for managing the contract. So I'm hoping that addresses that concern about answer that.
Yes, so just for a moment, so we've got the kind of grant funding we're using to kind of set all the setup costs is going to be covered by that, with only a little bit of staff time from us, and then we're expecting everything else to be funded from the income that's generated from it, and we're not expecting any additional kind of any payments, anything from the council after that point. Is that correct, Jess?
At this stage, we don't anticipate that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, thank you. On the basis I was keeping the best to last, Councillor Law.
Oh, you're still trying to make up for that, but well, I remember. Sorry, or convener. So yeah, convener. Yeah. So I think we've been talking about all the growth in the infrastructure, but I think we're missing that the key issue would be that if we don't go down this route, it means the infrastructure that we have just now, when Charge Place Scotland turns off. That would mean that people who are accessing the charges just now would not be able to do that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Law, and for your chair. That is correct, unless the council is able to find additional resource for us to do it in-house.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Quinn.
Just to follow up that point, just for clarification, in order for that to be a sum zero exercise, we would need to charge way above market rates, would we not, locally?
Through your chair. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Kevin. There's no other questions. Councillor Harrison to move the paper.
Thanks, Convener. To meet the net zero emission targets by 2050, the Scottish and UK governments have set an ambitious goal to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030, with all new cars and vans being fully zero emissions by 2035. To that end, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund has been set up to attract private investment for network expansion of EV chargers, especially in areas that might not be commercially viable without public subsidy. By working together, the 8 councils are maximising the EVIF to deliver the collective goals of delivering a well-designed, accessible and equitable charging network that meets the needs of all of the communities, regardless of location or socio-economic status. And that will ensure fair tariffs in relation to national averages and promoting the use of renewable energy, while also attracting private sector investment while maintaining a focus on public benefit. Due to the very small scale of Clackmanannshire, we are one of only 2 local authorities in Scotland which has failed to attract private sector investment in public EV charging. Therefore, in isolation, Clackmanannshire would struggle to attract a CPO. If Clackmanannshire were not to stay within the South of Scotland group, there are only two possible options for the future, which Kevin outlined, which is secure and fund a replacement back office through a procurement exercise, or switch off the council's current EV charging networks. The current EV charging network in Clackmanannshire consists of 36 charge points, of which around a third of these do not meet current standards and regulations would require to be replaced. This would require significant capital investment by the council, and we just don't have that capital investment. Tariffs have been in place since July 2023, and the income from these tariffs are covering the day-to-day electricity costs, but any profit is very low and unlikely to cover the likely future costs of maintenance, warranty replacement and the new back office. As ChargePoint Scotland's back office has been switched off in April 2026, the council needs to tender for and fund the new back office provider. Given there is a 3-month lead time for migration, this would need to be tendered for in the very near future. As the council would retain ownership of the chargers, then all liabilities and enforcement fines associated with the ChargePoint regulations would then fall back on the council as well. Switching off the public network in Clackmanannshire would leave the area very poorly served for those reliant on public charging. The commercial market is very poor, with only a few public chargers installed on private land, such as supermarkets. And the council would face significant pressure from the public and businesses if we were to switch off the network. There would also be costs associated with decommissioning and removing these units, some of which are less than 5 years old. After all that, and given the presentation that we've got, I think that the only way forward for the council is to progress with this partnership. So, yeah, I move the paper.
Thank you. Councillor Lott, a second.
Thanks. I'm happy to second this. I think, as we've heard, due to our position with our electric charging points, the complexity of the issues involved, and I think also forgetting the fact that if we're going in this regional thing, I think it will make it a lot easier for the public to access these electric charging units going forward, because they'll be using the same platform and whatnot. So again, I'm really happy with this to go forward. Just worried slightly about the timescales, and I hope we can get this shifted on and sorted as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. The paper's open for debate. Councillor McCluckie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I recognise that electric vehicle sales and uptake of them is going to increase, and I recognise how important this partnership is. So to that end, I've no intention not to approve. I think it's vital we get involved in this. What does concern me, though, is, going back to my question, is the projections in the paper are effectively fantasy. A quick internet search will tell you how electric vehicle sales have slowed, and a considerable number of manufacturers have scaled back their future plans in their electric vehicle manufacturing. I would feel a lot more comfortable with this if the projections seemed a bit more realistic. I think the projections are far too high, given that they're based on what they need it to be, rather than what they think it probably will be. I think it's been looked at the wrong way. When you're looking at one of the tables, it's going to increase the number of chargers in Clackmanannshire more than double. Dumfries and Galloway is going to be 3 times the number. And I just think that doesn't tie in at all to what sales data suggests and what major car manufacturers are doing in terms of their electric vehicle manufacturing. So I'm concerned about the projections in it, but overall I do recognise how important it is, and for Clackmanannshire in particular, we do not want to be left in a position where we don't have an offer and we can't make anything out of it. So, like I said, I have no intentions not to agree with the paper, but I am concerned about the projections that are far too high.
Thank you. Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, Councillor McCluckie hit the nail on the head, I think. For us, I think it's a no-brainer. We're not in the business of taking that kind of risk. With the market uncertainty alluded to a minute ago, doubtful stats and all the rest of it, it doesn't add up for me. I wouldn't be investing in this, so for that reason I'm out. But I will vote for it. I'll support the paper, because we need to solve the problem that's looming on us in terms of our charging network. So it's an absolute no-brainer to approve this, to get this, transfer this responsibility to someone else who's in the business of risk and reward. That's not where we are.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor Harrison, you get the opportunity to sum up once. Just make sure nobody else is looking to come and debate. Councillor Quinn.
Thanks. Now, to me, this seems like an obvious choice. You know, there's an option of we know we can't do it ourselves. We have this opportunity to do something that potentially will get us, you know, the investment we need, improve our charging network, and ensure that we're providing kind of competitive pricing to people who are using it. And you know, I'm an owner of one of the 636 electric vehicles in Clackmanannshire, so you know I know a little bit about charging. You know, I went on a long trip at the weekend there, and so I had to stop at some places to charge. And I ended up stopping some cafe in the middle of nowhere, and I have to walk around because I need something to do for a few minutes. And the thing is, if we turned off our charging, everybody would drive around us, because everyone with an EV would need to stop eventually, and they would all go driving around us if there was no chargers in the area that were available. And to me, that's the option. We've got an option of improving our charging network, increasing the number of chargers, making it more competitive, or we do that, so we lose out on people coming to and through Clackmanannshire as a result of that as well. And that's only going to increase in the future as the number of EVs increases. So I don't think we can miss a trick. To me, this isn't just like the least worst option. It's actually a really, really positive option, and there's a lot of benefits to this. So that's why I'll be supporting this paper as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Harrison, you want the opportunity to sum up?
Yeah, I will very, very briefly, Chair. It's just a couple of points that have been brought up there. I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. People won't buy EV cars if there's no EV chargers. So I think it's a prudent thing to do, is to increase the EV chargers and then encourage people to use EV cars. And I think that's a very good point that Councillor Quinn has just brought up there. We don't want to be an area that has very, very little EV chargers, because those people who do have them, EV cars at the moment, will just bypass us altogether if they're not here. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. So the other ones outlined at 2.2 for us to note. What we've been asked to do is recommend the Council approve the publication of the South of Scotland electric vehicle charging strategy. We're happy to approve. Thank you. Item 8 is the housing needs and demand assessment, and Body will take us through it this morning.
Thank you, and morning, councillors. The paper presented today is an update in terms of where our team have reached in terms of the housing need and demand assessment. Obviously, my thanks go to Councillor McTaggart and Councillor Coyne for joining us on that journey of travel in terms of meeting up with the market partnership as we went through the work, the quite detailed work in terms of the housing need demand assessment, and I'm sure they've got a lot out of that process. Clearly now we're reaching the end of the process for the housing need and demand assessment, so the paper today updates council on where that's reached, what the next steps are in terms of the consultation during the summer, and the work that will then be required then to make sure that we get final approval from the Scottish Government before coming back to council for homologation, likely in November. Obviously happy to take any questions on the report presented today.
Thanks, Murray. Councillor Forson.
Thanks. I have a bit of an issue with the kind of base figures, etc., that we use, and I just think I don't know, they seem really unrealistic. How many folk do we currently have on our council housing waiting list?
I feel like Mary here. We've got in excess of 2,000 people on our waiting list. We do appreciate that our waiting list is now due for a period of review and reflection. So we are due to write out to our waiting list applicants just to make sure that that's fully up to date, because obviously some people join our waiting list and join waiting lists elsewhere in the country, so sometimes people don't inform us if they get a house elsewhere.
Okay, so on the basis that just say we've got 2,000 people on there, and we've also got people on the waiting list on your other social landlords, would that figure not be the baseline for the demand for socially rented houses?
Yeah, we've obviously discussed this in detail before, and clearly the work that completes the NDA, and obviously goes back to council, is they're clearly interested in the scenarios, and obviously Kate, who's led this work for the service, has obviously put a couple of scenarios in the paper, and clearly that's the work which council has told to determine in terms of the scenarios that go forward. Clearly, in terms of the tool, it's basically just that it's an upgraded Excel spreadsheet to an extent. There's various inputs that you've got to put in. We've done a lot of work looking at the specialist housing needs, for example. There's been specific forums looking at that. And obviously the tool then looks at population growth, it looks at how many people are likely to be rehoused during that period, outward migration, etc. So there's a whole series of different factors that do play an interplay. Yes, you would, for example, wish that your model predicts that basically everybody in your waiting list could be rehoused during a period of time. But clearly there is obviously movement within the tool and in the area in terms of whether people get a job elsewhere and then get housed elsewhere. But certainly what the models are telling us is there is a clear requirement in terms of the affordable housing need in the area, and that sort of demand is focused within the social housing sector. What the model is also telling us, obviously, is giving us a clear indication at the other end in terms of the sort of purchase market that there's a lessened demand for the purchase of properties, which is in clear stark contrast to the investigation that the reporter had on a site in the area.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was heading, because obviously we know that there's a significant demand for socially rented houses in the area. However, a reporter took a decision that there was no demand, and therefore a house builder was able to get off with not providing the required 25%. So I'm just really keen that when we move forward, that the figures that kind of go in are really reflective of our area and actually reflect the demand, rather than someone being able to say, well, you know, your model only showed you X, Y, and Z, therefore, you know, house builders X, you can get away with doing nothing.
Yeah, clearly that's why we brought this, one of the reasons as to why we brought this paper early to council, so that there's a clear demonstration and on record by this council that there is a clear demand in this area from the initial work we've done. The work involving the councillors, involving the Housing Market Partnership, it is a very robust process that we have to go through it, and clearly, obviously, there's a robust period that the Scottish Government do to obviously check the scenarios that we've selected and look at the evidence that we've then provided in terms of, especially around the specialist housing provision, which we've already sent into the Government early ahead of that deadline, so we can start looking at that early. So they've requested a minimum of 8 weeks to make sure that they can then capitalise on and look at those figures, to make sure that we've calculated those correctly and we've stated on record what that is. Absolutely, I agree that that we are in a different position from when that reporter had made that decision, and clearly our figures are showing a clear demonstrable need for social rented housing in the area.
One last question, that's all right. How do homeless figures kind of feed into this? Because obviously, you know, you can't really predict that, but we do know that there's increasing levels of homelessness, not just here, but across the country. So how does that figure in? And would that have any, I suppose, effect on the actual output?
Thanks, Councillor, for the questions. Since this paper has been done, there's considerable more work has been done on the HND and inputs for the housing needs. One thing possibly to remember is when we're looking at housing need, it's not the full housing waiting list, because we have transfers. So we're actually looking at the numbers of new units on the ground. Now we've got a housing market partnership next week, and we'll be debating that. The homelessness figures are included within all of the figures. Whether we've got 3 different scenarios, and all of which include homelessness figures, and we're looking at they're actually going up. So we're taking that into account.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Coyne, followed by Councillor McCluskey.
Thanks, Convener. The questionnaire. Murray, are you happy to hear?
Hey, no, go for it. I'm just
The questionnaire, Murray, which we're being asked to approve. Thank you for the accolade. Has that been road tested? And by that I mean, because it's very much a sort of qualitative thing. It's not quantitative report. So it's people's opinions that you're trying to get, and those opinions may or may not be informed. And you're going to be asking a wide range of people questions that some of them are quite difficult to answer. And by road testing, I mean you run the test through a group of people, then you go back and interview them and have the same conversation and try and elicit those answers in conversation. And if they match, the questionnaire works. If they don't match, then the questionnaire needs to be redesigned. Have you gone through that process, or do you intend going through that process?
That's a question. In terms of your main element, yes, in terms of the work we've done has been pretty robust. I do take your appreciation in terms of, and it alludes back to perhaps some of the comments that Lorraine made about the transformational space, about making sure that the people you're asking are fully informed and have got an understanding, because what you don't want to necessarily do is, obviously, as you know, we've done a lot of work in terms of the market partnership to look at some of the underlying demand, get into the number of some of the real figures the Councillor Forson's asked there about whether we've included homelessness, etc. So you go out and ask a sample based on the survey whether this meets what they expect in the local area, and you could get a huge variety of different responses. But I would say that obviously that we're not this isn't our first rodeo in terms of doing this. We've done HNDAs in the past, and obviously we are fully informed by, and there's best practice checks with other local authorities in terms of how they've went around their sort of assessment and questionnaire. It's probably more of a struggle probably to get people to answer the questionnaire than actually whether that's your main point in terms of whether the validation of what they respond back. It's only to an extent it's a sense check in terms of, or whether somebody comes forward with something that perhaps we haven't necessarily considered. But when you read the questions, obviously there'll need to be a documentation which gives some of the background information as well as part of the survey, so that people aren't just jumping necessarily to their own conclusions without any recourse to any background information.
So it's going to be influential, but not the core driver of the data.
Yeah. The absolute core driver of the data is the robust assessment by the Scottish Government. It's the absolute critical thing. The worst thing we can do is go through this whole process and actually the Scottish Government not determine that it's a robust and credible process that we went through. So that's clearly why we've had the market partnerships, went through and spent as much time as we have in terms of some of the specialist provision that Monica and Kate's done.
Thank you. Councillor McCluskey, to be followed by Councillor Law.
Councillor Law, your approval.
Councillor Law.
Thanks for noticing me, Mark. I know 3.11 states that should the planning service will have to take this into account. But I think it's important to just emphasise that should an application come in to build houses, that this will be used, and even though it's not completed, just sitting on the planning committee, I know it's a huge issue, so I just want to make sure, just on record again.
Yeah, so planning colleagues have asked us about this process and where we've reached with that process. Obviously, Councillor Forson's has alluded to, and I've responded in terms of the work that the report had looked at, and clearly at that stage, the report had made a decision based on our last house needs and demand assessment. Clearly, what we're indicating at this stage is that the scenarios that we've been working through collectively as part of the Housing Market Partnership clearly indicate that despite the investment that's been made over the years in affordable housing, that there's still some way to go with our current figures. And obviously, as Kate's just highlighted, in response to the council leader, that their homeless figures are only heading one direction at present, and that's skywards. So, yes, we have had discussions with planning, and planning have asked us, so yeah, any application that comes in the meantime, this should be given due consideration. It could be challenged because it's not went through the full credible process. But I would suggest if it was challenged and it went to the reporter, then there is clear evidence here that the council is making a clear steer today that there is definitely a demand there for social rented housing.
So is that from now on, or if there's an application currently, would it, as if, what I mean, like, if an application had been submitted, say, last month, and it's going through that process of planning just now, or will it be from when this is confirmed in council, then will it take or I just wanted to have some clarification.
All planning decisions are obviously subject to the challenge via the Scottish Government reporter process, regardless of this. So even if today we were coming back with a HND that went through the full process, fully robust and credible by the Scottish Government, it could still be challenged. There still is that risk. What we're trying to do in the meantime is obviously mitigate that risk between now and the period in terms of when we come back to Council, hopefully with that robust and credible analysis by the Scottish Government for it to be fully approved by Council. So what our engagement has been with planning is for them to take into consideration between now and that period, these figures that we're presenting here today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCluskey.
Just a quick one, Murray, based on one of the replies you gave to Councillor Forson when you said there was 2,000 people on the waiting list. If memory serves me correct, I think there was a paper came to Council 2-3 years ago, and that figure was quoted, and the figure alongside it, in terms of potentially available properties, I think was about 800. Is that still roughly where we sit?
So one of the things we do look at is like in terms of our transfer and how many properties become available during the course of the year. So in the last couple of years, alongside a growing presentation rate for homelessness, so our presentation rate for homelessness, it's about 680 just now. So that's since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we were probably looking at presentation rates about 450, etc. So obviously we've covered some of this off in some of the member presentations in terms of the performance meetings. In the last couple of years, our actual properties becoming available has also reduced, which in one hand is a good thing because it means that we're actually, the level of support, we're helping people sustain their tenancies. So that's a charter indicator in terms of level of sustainment, so that's a good thing. But on the one hand, it then impacts us in terms of then providing relets for homeless applicants as well. So it's a delicate balance in terms of we would be able to deal with more homeless cases, more kinship carers, more people through the promise if we had more houses become available. But at the same time, it then hits us in terms of void rent loss, etc., etc. So these things are a very delicate balance between managing the different aims of the business.
Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, thanks, Mike. Councillor McTaggart to the paper.
Thanks, Convener. As mentioned, I've been part of the Housing Market Partnership Group, which is also mentioned in the report. And I must begin by thanking Kate and Monica for the masses of work that's been done with the group and on the HNDA to date. This paper is a mere snapshot, and the amount of work that sits behind it is immense. It's labour-intensive, time-consuming, and in respect of the HNDA tool that Murray has alluded to, it's quite mind-boggling. And the process isn't yet complete. However, we've reached a point where it's appropriate to bring this paper to Council today. Our first draft has been approved by the Scottish Government, and we are now moving to the next stage, which will take us nearer to completion. The paper today is a step towards that. While all three recommendations are very important, I respectfully ask Council to focus on the second recommendation, the point that Councillor Law has just made, 2.2. You'll know that our HNDA was well out of date, which has raised problems in the recent past around developers' responsibility to provide social housing as an obligation under the terms of the Scottish National Planning Framework 4. Housing developers have managed to avoid that obligation, as our outdated HNDA has allowed them to do that. The recommendation at 2.2 will ensure that future planning applications for housing developments in Clackmanannshire must take cognizance of this updated HNDA position, thus highlighting the current and potential future need for social housing in Clackmanannshire. As a footnote, the authors of the draft HNDA submitted were commended for the quality of the documents by the Scottish Government as part of the new HNDA process. Well done to Kate and Monica, and thanks very much. Happy to support this paper.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Second.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I'd like to also acknowledge the work carried out by the team on this, a huge amount of work done. The HNDA has already been said is a crucial document for the Council for determining housing needs, but especially with regards to planning for new developments within the county. It helps to inform the needs for any social housing within any of these new developments and allows the Council to ensure that social housing requirements can be added to planning consents as appropriate. The draft HNDA tables at 3.9 and 3.10 should be endorsed to ensure that the planning service has an evidence base to revert to and would assist any discussions with the Scottish Government reporter in the future. I also look forward to seeing the results of the consultation process and as well as the final HNDA being brought back to Council later in the year.
Thank you. The paper is now open for debate. Anyone wish to debate the paper? Okay, there's no debate, there's no need to sum up. What we're asked to do is note the purpose of the housing need and demand assessment and for Council to endorse the initial findings of the research to ensure that any planning applications for housing development are conniving of them and approve the public consultation as set out at 312 in relation to the HNDA findings, draft consultation proposal at Appendix 1. I'm happy to approve. Thank you. Item 9 is the Housing Property Acquisitions Policy and Asset Disposal Policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Council. This is a fairly short paper, but it presents the Council two policies, the Housing Property Acquisitions Policy and the Housing Asset Disposal Policy. Members will be aware that for some time we have been actively acquiring and disposing of properties when appropriate to do so. Whilst we have a well-established process in place for this, what we haven't had up until this point is a clear and transparent documented guide to help support this activity. These policies provide that. In relation to property acquisitions, sections 3.1 to 3.4 of the paper summarise our recent off-the-shelf activity and our commitment to continue to acquire further properties in line with our strategic housing investment plan. Sections 3.4 and 4.2 highlight some of the benefits brought by acquiring properties in mixed tenure areas or where there is a specific need for a particular type of property. The key eligibility criteria required to be considered in order for Council to make an offer of purchase for a property is contained within the policy document in Appendix 1. In relation to disposal activity, sections 3.5 and sections 4.4 to 4.7 of the paper describe in brief the most likely scenarios where the Council may seek to dispose of housing-owned property assets with the intention to reinvest the income received back into the HRA. This will help to support activity aligned to meet our current and future strategic housing needs and objectives. The paper recommends in section 2.1.3 that Council approve for delegation to be provided to the Strategic Director for Place to progress the sale of HRA-owned assets. This in instances where there is no demand for the asset or where it makes no financial sense to the HRA to retain it. Currently, this disposal activity requires Council approval. Fuller detail is provided on this within sections 410 to 412 of the paper. Moving forward, we have plans in place to develop a revised housing asset management strategy. This will be aligned to our SHIP and will be closely interlinked to our HRA financial business plan. These strategic documents will be key in ensuring that we make best use of the existing housing stock, as well as identifying areas where there is an opportunity to add or dispose of assets and in doing so improve our housing stock portfolio. The policies presented to you today will help to guide us in undertaking this activity. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thanks. Any questions? Councillor Law, followed by Councillor Coyne.
Say for 4.5, the one that says like where they're mixed tenures and maybe we're not the minority, would we then write to say it's 4 in a block, we've got one, and we're like, we can't really kind of get any headway on making any changes to this, so we're going to dispose of that. Will we then write to the other owners in that block just to confirm that we have sold our flat and we've not got any kind of hold over that building going forward?
Thanks, Councillor Law. There's no specific requirement for us to do that. We're not a property factor, and we don't have a specific requirement to do that. But clearly, in some instances, it may be beneficial to communicate that to others within the block, depending on the makeup of the block. Assuming we have contact details and we have means to communicate to others within a mixed tenure block, then you can see the benefit in that. But there's no specific requirement for us to do that.
Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Convener. And if your buying activities go well, but your selling activities are a bit slow, eventually you'll exhaust the capital pool for acquisitions, I would guess. If at that point, and you're presented with a wonderful opportunity to buy something really good, how would you propose to deal with that? Because you don't have the capital budget. Can you borrow against sales that are in the pipeline, or do you have to come to council and ask for additional funding for that?
Clearly, Councillor Coyne, our investment activity in terms of the HRA is determined by the capital programme presented to council each financial year. So obviously, in the last couple of years, we've just in January, we asked council to approve the purchase of 20 properties. Marie's already been working quite hard. We've secured 8 already with the assistance of our legal colleagues. Clearly, the question relates to if we reach a stage where we've reached 20, a few properties might come up. So, for example, the insertion in the large paper in terms of the house needs and demand assessment, and in relation to this paper, could be a scenario around a kinship carer family or a family perhaps with specific needs. So that would either require us, in terms of financial regulations, if we don't have the scope from the capital programme, to come back to council to seek the governance around that particular aspect, and subsequently as well seek authority from the Scottish Government if they would support such activity as well beyond perhaps what our grant funding allowance was for the financial year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. This paper and the policies attached seek to clarify the governance and protocol around asset acquisition and disposal. I think the papers and the answers provided by the officers have explained the processes, so I won't say too much more about that, except that I'm very pleased to see the inclusion around shared ownership properties. This was an historic programme that was used as a mortgage rescue tool when owner-occupiers were in danger of losing their properties. The share owned by the council does not include the obligation to repair and maintain the property. That responsibility lies within the share retained by the owner-occupier, which may have become a burden for some. The paper seeks approval for the council to buy the shares currently retained by the owner-occupier, if the owner-occupier has a desire to do so, and to change the property from shared ownership to a tenancy, so that the occupier can continue to live in their home. It brings this outdated practice up to date and in some cases removes a burden for those who may be struggling with the upkeep of a property in these uncertain financial times. Happy to propose the paper. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison to second.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Not really too much to add to what's already been said, but I'm glad to see in the paper, and I think it's important to highlight in paragraph 4.11 the need for consultation with the spokesperson for housing and also the council tenants before disposal. And also, like Councillor McTaggart, the plans for shared mortgage properties, I think that definitely looks like a proposal that could benefit both owners, depending on the circumstances, obviously, and also the council in the long term by securing further stocks.
Thank you. The paper is now open for debate. Anybody wish to debate the paper any further? No. Okay, so we've been asked to note the service plan to review the current arrangements in place for a small number of shared ownership mortgage rescue properties that are jointly owned by the council and private owner-occupiers. We've been asked to approve the housing property acquisition policy at Appendix 1, the housing asset disposal policy at Appendix 2, and to approve the limited delegation to the director of police and disposing of HRA assets in line with Section 411. I'm happy to approve. Thank you. Item 10, which is the paper on reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, and Murray's going to take us through that.
Morning, Council, again. So obviously today's paper presents Council with an update in terms of the discussions we've reached in terms with the owners in terms of the RAC affected, the three affected walks in Tillicootery. Provides an update in discussions we've had recently with owners, and it proposes to Council a number of recommendations to move forward, most importantly in terms of taking forward repairs which owners have sought with us in discussions to take forward. Obviously the paper outlines there's two options in terms of the repairs, but we're asking Council to approve both so that we can then have further dialogue and engagement with each of the owners on these options in terms of the work, in terms of the roof, and in terms of the wider work in terms of the roof and the render and energy efficiency works. The paper also notes that offers us to be given the delegate authority out with the sort of financial regs and stand orders to be able to make offers to owners who may wish to exit the properties. There has been a few owners, I would just say a few owners who have indicated that preference, and obviously this would give the officers power via the strategic director to initiate discussions in line with that. The paper further updates Council in terms of the update from the Petitions Committee, which was held on the 3rd of April. Obviously, we're joined with members of the community in the audience today. They've joined us recently, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions, Councillor McTaggart, or the Councillor Law?
Thanks, Convener. Murray, can we just clarify a couple of points, please? The options that have been presented to the owners, do the owners have a preference, a clear preference for an option? And also, if we were to go with option 1, which does not include the rendering, is there a likelihood that that rendering would need to be done at a later date? And is that likely to be more costly at a later date than it would be if it was done as part of the roof replacement programme? Thanks.
Some of this process, and especially in recent days, almost appears that sometimes I'm being accused of playing 4D chess, so I have to be mindful of my responses. In terms of the owner's preference, as I've stated in some of the email communication which some of you have been copied into, when people ask me this, I won't know the specific answer to that until I've actually individually met the owner. So Kim, my colleague, and I have set up discussions individually, one-to-one, with each of the owners. And at that stage, when they're in the room with us together, we'll be able to establish their clear preference in terms of whether they A, wish to sell, or B, wish to pursue the repairs perspective. And obviously there is no pressure on anybody to pursue a sale. I won't be putting any pressure on anybody to take forward a sale. That is not my nature. It's only if they indicate to us that that's one of their preferences. So if we can maybe put that one straight to bed. In terms of the render, clearly the restriction that it's against the block has obviously been a notice applied by our colleagues at Building Standards, where following engineering advice, they've determined that the roof is in a dangerous condition and likely to be in a position to collapse. Obviously that's a real safety concern. In terms of, so to remove the notice and to allow people to move back into properties, clearly that situation has to be resolved in terms of satisfaction to building control, building safety, to allow people to return. So that the render doesn't interfere with the notice. So if the roof works were done, people would then be able to return back home. In terms of the condition of the render, there is obviously aspects of the render which is showing signs of being both, and probably would be beneficial to be taken forward at this stage. Certainly, as the contractor laid out at the presentation that we recently had, clearly we would do further investigations in terms of some of the energy efficiency works around the block. So, for example, although there's an allowance in the project costs for replacing the cavity wall beading, it could be the case that once we actually do further investigations, so for example, we would drill into the cavity with borescope cameras to check on the condition. If the condition's fine, we would leave it as is. So obviously that would then reduce the cost of that option further, and obviously contract to rent some detail with residents in terms of that. In terms of if you decided just to proceed with roof, at this stage without the render, one of the biggest costs and challenges, of course, for doing render on a block of that size is obviously the scaffolding costs. So if we were to do the roof now and come back in a few years' time, it would be effectively paying for the scaffolding twice. So yes, I would, without totally analysing where market trends in terms of the cost of render works might go, you would almost say for certain that the cost would be more expensive at a later date.
Can I just come back into the same? I think Murray's misunderstood my first question. Never like him. I wasn't really alluding to any sales or anything like that. I was talking about the two options, just the roof or roof and render. So it was really that. Is there a preference there from the owners? Thanks.
I would reiterate what I've said though. Until I get each owner in the room, I can't tell.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Law, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Obviously, people have been out of their homes for quite some time. There's also, in order to safeguard the buildings, there was I know that flats they had to go into and put in window coverings and I think the doors and that. So I think there has been internal damage to some of the properties. So I just kind of wanted to find out what kind of happens with the repairs for them and who pays for them. Is it the owners or is it the council that will be paying for those repairs to any kind of damages that have been sustained while investigations or safety work, as I said, like the window coverings have gone on?
So part of your question is quite simple. We've put our hands up. There's been formal complaints made against the authority, especially in relation to the last matter you raised. That should clearly not have happened. We've put our hands up. So that there has been a commitment made. So for the damage that has occurred through that incorrect process of placing those window shutters on, obviously we can be given a commitment that we have to make good on that damage. Similarly, there's been damage done in some of the upper floors when we've made hatches, and obviously we've responded via the complaints process to obviously again make good when we can, because clearly at the present stage we can't make good. In terms of whether some of the other properties, so during this process, if some of them have suffered ill effects of not being occupied during that period of time, clearly that's, as we will need to do in terms of our properties, we will need to make good those properties before we could re-let them. Similarly, owner-occupiers themselves will have to give that consideration when they think about matters about moving back in, etc. So that will be their responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Convener. Just a question on the render and the roof repairs. Particularly the render, do you think that will add value to the property as opposed to not doing it? And would that value be significantly additional?
I think it's maybe one of the aspects in terms of where there's maybe been some confusion over the valuations, and perhaps where some that's is rested. I think it may be one of the responses given by Kieran to maybe one of the owners is perhaps not as went into as much detail as possible. In general, as you know, valuations are based on a property being in a condition where it can be let. So when he's given a valuation, he's basically done it on the basis of, yeah, council's proposed these works, is going to make the property available for reoccupation and re-let. The particular practice as to whether render adds value is a debatable point, and it's probably a debatable point within the RICS guidance itself, and it's probably something that would need to be visible on site and seen as to how much of an impact that makes within the local areas, as whether it adds a further attraction. Of course, valuations are obviously the subject of the RICS Red Book. They have to follow due guidelines in terms of how they apply the application. And obviously there is an element which is somewhat dubiety in terms of their own personal indication. So, but at present, I would suggest that the valuations provided to the owners, they don't give licence to the work in terms of the render enhancing the property.
Okay, yeah, I mean, valuation is an art, not a science, certainly. So it's possible that doing the render would add some value to the property, which would facilitate remortgaging and things like that, perhaps. Okay, fine. Yeah, option 8 is an odd one. That's the one where you don't use the top floor and you have what you call alternative accommodation. Mind boggles. What's alternative accommodation?
So in terms of some of the RAC, obviously you may have seen on the news that, especially in certain hospital locations or public buildings, you might have seen in some of our actual other local authorities in Scotland, they've actually got scaffolding and within internal stairwells. In terms of the approach that we looked at in terms of the blocks that we've got, in terms of that sort of safety decking, in terms of the internal stairwell that would need to be taken up, that there would be no option of accommodation on the top floor at all. It would remove that top floor. In terms of alternative accommodation, it was an idea pitched around the options appraisal, which was done at a particular time before the repairs contractor came forward with the proposal we've got just now. So it was done at a particular time. It would obviously be looking at in terms of whether we could, as Councillor Forster indicated earlier, around perhaps some of our response around homelessness, etc.
Okay, and there was some mention made of people going through the process of acquiring, selling, buying, whatever it is, the legal costs and all the costs of those transactional costs. Is there any possibility that we could organise a collective deal with a firm of surveyors, firm of lawyers, to try and get, to cut the costs down, even by 10%, something like that? So, is that a possibility?
No, we can't as lawyers negotiate deals. I mean, we can perhaps reach out to some of the local firms, and say we've got this process that's perhaps going to happen, but unfortunately the rules that govern us, we're not allowed to kind of make deals. We act for the council, not anybody else. These deals would need to be in terms of the individuals, in terms of the council acquiring. I'd love to be able to help. It's just one of those law society rules as lawyers. But it doesn't mean, as I said, we can't go out and reach out to a number of local firms and say, this is what's going on. Can you help?
Okay, thanks. I just thought maybe we could have done a bit of hand-holding to help the residents get through that. Never mind. Yeah, 8.8 on page 188. What's a moral hazard?
Sorry, what section was that?
188, page 8.8.
It'd be helpful if I don't know the right paper. I think this is in relation to the moral hazard aspect. Is obviously clearly around when you purchase anything in terms of car, home, etc. Obviously, caveat emptor applies. Buyer beware. Obviously, I do appreciate the situation the homeowners do find themselves in. They feel like that perhaps either they should have had acknowledgement from somebody at the stage they were buying, either via, whether it was direct via the councillor or previous subsidiaries, or via home reports or via surveyors at the time, that should have been known to them. So I do take the point and an aspect to that. But clearly, when we all buy property, and we perhaps in this room have bought some in the past, you always potentially come across pitfalls that perhaps aren't established via surveyor processes, etc. And sometimes in life, you have to then obviously deal with that. Obviously, the RAC owners are obviously pursuing that they wish to be compensated for the element of the discovery of RAC due to its limited lifespan, etc. So it's understandable because it's an issue that's affected them much widely, and Councillor Forson spoke at the Petitions Committee around that particular aspect. So you can see their point. It's not like finding that the electric shower is not working when you first move into a flat, for example. So there's obviously some element of scale, but clearly as a council, we're not in a position, obviously, the financial statement's been read out this morning in terms of the medium-term strategy. Obviously, we can't foresee every circumstance that might come into somebody's private household or private lifestyle in terms of what they might discover a problem within their property. So we're not in a position to bail out on each occasion.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I was going to ask one more thing.
10.6, the housing spokesperson will write again to the Scottish and UK governments to request the establishment of a support fund to assist those homeowners affected by the presence of RAC. Any movement on that?
I've prepared a draft letter for Jane, but I don't know if the spokesperson wants to do that for.
Following this, we'll get that letter sent off. Thank you.
Councillor Coyne?
Sorry.
Anybody else, any other questions? No? Okay, thanks. Murray, Councillor McTaggart to move the paper.
Thanks, Convener. We're all fully aware of the issues around the RAC-affected properties. They've been harrowing for those tenants and owners who've been caught up in this, including the council. Being the majority owner, the council has lost access to much-needed housing stock, while other housing stock has been taken out of circulation for the purpose of decanting those tenants and owners displaced by the evacuation of the RAC-affected blocks. However, we must be fully mindful of the effect this has had on those owners who've been not only left homeless, but saw their investment being wiped out literally overnight. And while as a council and being the majority owner, we could agree to approve an option that provides a quick and short-term solution, in my view, that would be short-sighted and morally wrong. Others are heavily affected by what we decide, and their lives have been disrupted over the course of many months, with a far-reaching impact on each and every one of them. We must consider that, and we must do our best to find a solution in consultation with them that reaches a mutually agreed position. Since the evacuation of the RAC-affected blocks, those who were council tenants have been rehoused, and following approval of this paper, will have the option to remain in their current tenancy if they wish, as explained in the paper. And it has already been established that all displaced tenants have expressed a desire to remain where they are. Those who are owners are in a far more fragile position. This has been a traumatic time for them, and I'm sure Council will agree that we fully sympathise with those owners and that we want to do whatever we can to help relieve this burden. Council is being asked today to approve the recommendations to allow the process to progress to the next level, to give the owners a say in what happens next, a choice. And while this choice could include a big financial commitment, officers will continue to support the owners to find the right advice to allow them to make an informed decision on the best option for them. As noted in the paper, options 1 and 2 would result in changes to the Council's previously agreed roof and render programme, the budget for which has already been approved by Council. That programme would be reprofiled to free up a budget for the works associated with options 1 and 2. Council is not being asked to agree any further financial commitment to enable the works. Options 1 and 2 would also return 18 properties to our housing stock, helping us to reduce the strain on our existing availability. Since the evacuation of the RAC blocks, officers and elected members have been committed to finding the best possible outcome for the Council, the HRA and the owners. This has been a life-changing event for the owners, a very, very difficult time, and I hope we can now reach a long-awaited conclusion. Happy to propose the paper. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison to second the paper.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, as has already been said, this has been a terrible time for the owners and tenants of the RAC-affected properties, and I'm sure we all agree that we now need to start moving on towards a resolution to the issue that works for everyone. It is a very complex issue with owners, including the council and tenants, and all have different plans for the future. Some owners want to sell, some want to move back into the property, and most tenants have found accommodation that they're happy to stay in. As outlined in the paper, options 1 and 2, and particularly 2 with the roof and render replacement, look like the preferred options. And this will allow for existing roof and render work being carried out within the local authority area with an already approved budget to be reprioritised and focus on the RAC affected buildings. This is the most cost effective programme for the council and also the private owners, as the contractor has already been mobilised. This programme of works will allow the owners who want to move back into the buildings to do so, and also means that the council will regain housing stock. Some of the owners have already indicated that they would be open to sell, and the council officers will engage with them to provide a positive outcome for both. For those who want to move back into their homes, there is a financial outlay that will necessitate the need for proper financial advice, and officers will continue, as they have done so far, to signpost them to get correct advice. As I said at the start, we really need to start moving along to resolution for the people whose lives have been so badly impacted by this issue. And I believe that by approving options 1 and 2 and reprofiling the roof and render programme, and also approving the commencement of negotiations for council purchase of properties, we can start to do that.
Thank you. Paper's now open for debate. Councillor Forson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see the paper here today. I'm genuinely sorry it's taken so long to actually bring forward potential solutions. But I think as we all, kind of realise when it comes to the council, there's so much that has to be taken into consideration that it's not always just easy to put on the table what you would see as a solution. I think it's taken a lot of work from officers to come up with a solution that are on the table today, and they are being quite innovative. It's trying to use existing funding streams within the council to come to a solution that helps everyone. I think options 1 and 2 are genuinely the best ways forward. The repairs of the roof and potentially some other works there. We do have to take into consideration, though, the financial impact this will have on owners, and make sure that we do find solutions moving forward there. Hopefully this gives some comfort to those who have been affected that we are moving on. I do think that we need to continue to press both governments for solutions for funding for this. People have been left out of pocket. They can potentially have quite further financial burdens moving forward. And a national solution to this, I think, has to be considered by everybody. And I know that we will, as a council, continue to press that moving forward. Pleased to see the paper here today, and hopefully we get some closure and some solutions for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Gideon. Councillors wear 2 hats. One is to represent the council to the people. And wearing that hat, you'd be inclined to go down the road of saying, well, what's best for the council, what will preserve its money, its property, and have the least impact on it. But the other hat is to represent the people to the council. And I think in this case, that trumps the first. I think what's happened over the past couple of years has put an extreme burden on a small section of our population, but a very significant burden. And I think that, for me, that trumps my first responsibility in this particular case because of the human and emotional side of this. And I would be happy to support the paper and going for options 1 and 2.
Thank you. Any other contributions, Councillor Long?
I did put my hand up just then, so you didn't miss it, so I didn't feel bad. I just wanted to echo Councillor Forson's and Councillor Scott's comments. I think they put it more eloquently than I could. I have spoken to a number of owners, so I couldn't comprehend what they've been through and the toll that's taken on. So I do hope this is starting this process of a way forward. So I welcome this paper going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor McTaggart, you want an opportunity to sum up at all?
Please. I thank the other elected members for voicing their support for this paper. For the owners, this paper is just another step in a direction that will hopefully get them back to a position where they can feel a bit more comfort and security that their lives might get back on track. We cannot reverse what has happened in these past 2 years. And the trauma and distress that they must have gone through is would be unbearable. So on behalf of this council, I would just like to offer them as much our support as we possibly can and pass on our best wishes and hope that we can get a light at the end of the tunnel for these people who have suffered so badly over the past couple of years. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot that this paper's asked us to do in terms of what we know and approve. But given its importance, if you just bear with me, I'm going to run through them so we're clear. We've been asked to note the progress that's been made by officers working with evacuated owners and occupiers to find a sustainable and affordable solution for the 3 blocks of flats in Tillicountry. To note the options appraised by officers as outlined within section 5 and summarised within appendix A. To note that evacuated tenants will be offered the opportunity to convert the current temporary accommodation into secure tenancy as provided for in paragraph 7.4. And we've been asked to note the responses to the actions agreed as part of the Petitions Committee from the 3rd of April, outlined within section 10. What we've been asked to approve is the recommendation to progress with options 1 and or 2 of the report, recognising the majority of owners' preference for such options and the resultant benefit to the council in returning a significant number of housing units to operational use. You've been asked to approve the home loss payment of £1,500 for those tenants who've converted their tenancy as provided in paragraph 2.4. Approve that for owners who have expressed a preference for a voluntary sale, officers are authorised to enter into negotiation to agree terms and conditions in respect of such sales as outlined in paragraph 8.6. To approve the reprofiling of the housing revenue account, roof and render budget to accommodate works of the 3 evacuated blocks alongside the scheduled programme of activity for 25-26 as provided for in paragraph 9.1. Finally, we've been asked to approve the recommendations of option 1 and 2 in respect of repairs to the evacuated blocks as referenced at paragraph 9.1 to 9.3 to be taken forward by the service in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and Senior Manager for Legal and Governance. I'm happy to approve that paper. Thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to take a short adjournment now for a comfort break. We'll get back at 11:45.